Welcome to a slower time, where torches flicker, keys rattle, and stone corridors never forget. Tonight, we'll step quietly into the world of a medieval prison guard where silence watches, and duty becomes a cage of its own. Close your eyes, let the day fade, and drift into a story not often told, but always remembered by the walls. If you enjoy these immersive journeys through the past, gently tap the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts or dreams, and don't forget to subscribe for more sleep-friendly history. Rest easy now. You're safe. You're home. Sleep well. You wake up to the sound of iron. Not the pleasant ring of a blacksmith's hammer, shaping promise from steel, but the cold, heavy clank of chains dragged across wet stone. The kind of sound that doesn't just echo, it seeps. The smell hits you before the place does. Rotting hay. Sour sweat. Smoke that hasn't seen the sky in months. You blink, and the grey light barely cuts through the thick mist curling around the castle's foundation like it's trying to flee. This is your first day, your first breath as a prison guard in Lord Gerhardt's underground dungeon. You swallow hard. Your breakfast churns already. The sergeant beside you says nothing, just hands you the ring of keys. They're heavier than you expect. They jangle with a judgmental clink, like they know what you're about to become. The stairwell is narrow, spiral, and slick. Moss grows where sunlight forgot to reach, and each step down feels more like a descent into something mythic than municipal. Your boots slip once, and your fingers scrape against the jagged stone, drawing a thin line of blood. The sergeant laughs. "It won't be the last blood you shed in here," he says, not to comfort you, but to warn you. He doesn't offer a cloth. No one does. At the bottom of the stairs, the corridor splits. To the left, solitary cells. To the right, communal misery. Straight ahead, the torture chamber, but he doesn't say that out loud. He just nods toward it and says, "That's for later. The torches burn dimly, like even fire is reluctant to live here." You smell urine. You smell iron. You smell people who've given up on being people. And you haven't even opened a cell door yet. Your hands tremble the first time you turn a lock. It's not dramatic, no cinematic creak. Just a precise metal groan, like a hinge sighing at its fate. Inside, the prisoner barely looks up. He's wrapped in a blanket that's more rag than cloth, skin pale, nose broken, eyes sunken. He could be 30 or 50. Hunger doesn't age well. He doesn't beg. He doesn't speak. Just stares. And somehow, that's worse. You want him to scream, to fight, to spit. But he just stares. And you understand, in that long, dry moment, that this job isn't about managing people. It's about managing ghosts who haven't died yet. You back away, close the door. The lock clicks. You tell yourself it's just wood and metal. Not a coffin. Not a confession. But part of you doesn't believe it. By noon, your uniform feels like a trap. The wool itches, the leather stinks of old sweat, and the belt cuts into your ribs no matter how you adjust it. You walk the corridor alone now, your trainer having abandoned you to find your own rhythm. You try to ignore the noises. Coughs that rattle like chests full of gravel. Whispers that might be prayers, or might be curses. Someone is humming off key, tuneless, eerie. You don't find the source. You're not sure you want to. A rat scurries across your foot, and you don't flinch. That scares you more than the rat itself. You've already started adapting, and it's only been hours. There's a hole in the wall by cell 6 that looks like it was chewed by something larger than teeth should allow. You make a note to mention it. You don't. No one ever does. The food comes in a wooden cart, pushed by a boy too young to be here and too old to still be innocent. Gruel, black bread, something that might have once been onion. You're told to deliver it cell by cell, without engaging. No eye contact. No kindness. They'll use it against you, someone warned. You don't doubt it. You open the slot, push the bowl through, close it. Over and over. But at cell 9, a hand darts out too fast, too strong, and grabs your wrist. It's just a second. But the pressure, the desperation, the coldness of that touch it leaves a bruise you won't see but will feel for days. You yank free. The prisoner smiles, revealing broken teeth and a tongue with a missing chunk. New meat, he says. You slam the slot closed. Your heartbeat pounds in your ears like a war drum. You finish the deliveries faster after that. Evening brings no peace. Only a deeper dark. The torches flicker more violently now, casting shadows that jitter like they're trying to escape the walls. You're stationed at the north corridor alone. You try not to lean on the wall because it's sticky, but standing straight hurts your spine. You think you hear your name. You don't turn around. That's rule number 1 after dark. Never respond to voices unless you can see the mouth they came from. You don't know who made the rule, but you feel in your bones that it wasn't a joke. You pass the time counting the cracks in the stone, the knots in the wood, the rats. You name one of them. You regret it. You think of your mother, your old dog, the sunrise you missed today. You wonder if the prisoners dream. You wonder if they ever dream of you. When the shift ends, you don't feel relieved. You feel drained. Like something has been peeled from your soul and left on the floor somewhere between cell 4 and the storage room. You hand over your keys to the next guard, an older man, with dead eyes and a scar across his throat. He doesn't speak, just nods and walks off. You remove your uniform slowly, as if shedding skin. Your clothes underneath are damp with sweat, and the smell has begun to cling. No one waits for you. No one thanks you. You leave the dungeon and feel the night air on your face like forgiveness. But it's fleeting. You know you'll return tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. Until you forget the smell of flowers, the colour of sky, the sound of laughter. You lie in your cot that night, eyes open, chest tight. Sleep doesn't come easily. When it does, it's full of keys that don't fit locks, hands that won't let go, and a whisper you can't understand, but somehow know is meant for you. You wake up in sweat, not from heat, but dread. The rooster crows. Dawn comes, indifferent as ever, and you rise. Not because you want to, but because the dungeon waits. You learn quickly that the dungeon doesn't run on hours, or Belsit runs on routine. Precise, grinding, indifferent routine. You rise before the sun, when the air is still thick with the previous night's sweat and smoke. The smell clings to your skin, no matter how often you wash. You put on your uniform, fingers moving without thought-wool tunic, leather straps, iron-buckled boots. The key ring waits on your belt like a badge of hollow honor. As you descend those familiar spiral steps again, the chill wraps around your chest like a second uniform. No one greets you. No one nods. The silence doesn't welcome, it consumes. You unlock the main gate, and the iron grates cry out like something dying. Inside, it's just the same. Cold breath, flickering torchlight, and the ever-present hum of forgotten lives echoing behind thick stone. The daily schedule is carved into your bones now. Cell checks, waste removal, meal distribution, weapon count, prisoner log. None of it feels human. It's mechanical, ritualistic. You move from one task to another like a gear turning inside a great rusted machine that hasn't stopped in decades. You check each prisoner for breath, not life. You note injuries, but you no longer flinch. A bruised face, a bloodied eye, a limb swollen to twice its size from infection. No medicine is given. Just a line in the logbook. At first, you tried to remember their names. You thought if you clung to that, you could preserve some shred of decency. Now, they're just numbers. Cell 7 has been coughing for days. Cell 3 refuses to eat. Cell 12 whispers things when no one's around. You report it. No one cares. And in between these dull mechanical motions lies the worst part, the silence. It is not the kind of silence that soothes. It's the kind that stretches, yawns, and watches. Sometimes it's broken by the clatter of chains or the groan of someone turning over in pain. But mostly, it hangs there like fog. Thick, oppressive, full of the things no one says. You used to try filling it, whistling, talking to yourself, but it made the silence angry. You felt it. The walls seemed to pull your words in and twist them. Echoes that don't match your voice. Whispers that end with your name. So you stopped speaking altogether. Now you just walk. Footstep by footstep. Each one swallowed whole by stone that forgets you even as you tread upon it. The prisoners rarely speak. Some are too broken to form words. Others know that speaking draws attention, and attention brings pain. There's an unspoken pact between you and the mutual invisibility. You don't see them. They don't see you. But sometimes it breaks. Sometimes someone calls out. A hoarse plea for water. A raspy voice begging to be let into the light, just for a second. One asked you once what day it was. You didn't know. You didn't even guess. Time here is a melted candle, wax dripping into cracks no one can scrape out. You stared at that prisoner for a long moment before walking away. Not because you didn't care, but because if you answered, you would have admitted you were still human. And you're not sure you are anymore. Shackles are checked twice daily. That's another part of your job. Not to ensure safety, no. Safety is a word for nobles and market stalls. This is about control. The chains must always be taut enough to restrict, but never so tight that infection kills before a confession can be extracted. You inspect wrists that have long since lost feeling, ankles worn raw, necks rubbed pink from iron collars. Some prisoners weep. Some growl. Some offer nothing at all. Those are the worst. The quiet ones. You wonder what kind of life they lived before they ended up here. Were they farmers? Bakers? Lovers? Did they sing once? Did they laugh? You hope they did. You pray they did. Because whatever joy they once carried has been stripped to the bone and fed to the rats. And oh, the rats. They don't fear you. Not anymore. They scurry across your boots, mid-step, climb up hanging chains, chew through anything soft. You've caught one gnawing a prisoner's ear while they slept. You tried to stop it, once. Got bitten. Your hand swelled and festered for days. No one offered help. So now, you let the rats do what they must. They are part of the dungeon, as native as the moss and the mildew. At least they're honest. They take what they need, no more, no less. The same can't be said for men. The silence screams the loudest at midday. That's when the dungeon bakes from the sun above, heat pressing through the stone like a slow exhale. Sweat clings to your back, your thighs, your hairline. Breathing feels like drinking smoke. The prisoners groan more during these hours. The air gets thicker, hope thinner. The iron gets hot, burning skin. You touch it out of habit, then curse yourself. Every day you forget. Every day you burn. It's as if the dungeon is trying to brand you. Not with fire, but with routine. Repetition. Resignation. And you can feel it working. By the time night creeps in again, you've gone numb. Not just to pain, but to difference. There is no contrast here. No beginning or end. The hours flatten into a smear of locked doors, torches burning low, chains dragging across rock. You sit in the guard room and alcove, with a single wooden bench, and a bucket of water too filthy to trust. You sip anyway, because thirst is worse. Your shift isn't over. Not for hours. But you're already fading. Already fading into that blankness that lets you float through it all. You think of the world above, sunlight on water, bread warm from the oven, voices shouting in the market. But they feel like stories now, and you are no longer in them. As you walk your last round, torch in hand, a voice rises from cell 2. It's cracked, weak, but distinct. You're still here, it says. You freeze. The prisoner doesn't say anything else. Doesn't ask for food. Or freedom. Just that simple sentence. And in it recognition, you don't know if it's meant as comfort or condemnation. But it lodges deep in your chest. You walk on. You don't answer. You can't. Because the truth is, you are still here. Still listening. Still watching. Still pretending that silence doesn't have a voice. But it does. And now, it knows your name. The first time you're told not to look at them as people, it's just a comment. A passing grunt from a senior guard while you wash blood off a cuff ring. Makes it easier, he says, flicking something red off his boot like it's mud. You nod, though your stomach knots. But days pass. Then weeks. And somewhere between those endless rounds of torchlight patrol and iron-rusted chow slots, you stop remembering what their faces look like. You don't mean to. It just happens. They become silhouettes behind grates, groans behind doors, tasks to be checked off like firewood logs. You're no longer Harshita, daughter of a tailor, lover of songbirds and festivals. You are the guard, a shadow in leather, a tool. The soft parts of you are caged deeper than any cell down here. At first, you tried to keep some boundary. You nodded once at a prisoner who handed back their bowl without a fuss. Another time, you whispered easy when tightening a manacle on a child barely old enough to milk a goat. But even those tiny gestures echoed too loud. You were reported. No words were spoken, just the captain's cold eyes scanning your face a little too long the next morning. And so you learned. Kindness is not rewarded here. It is catalogued, noted, labelled as weakness. So you stopped. You stopped flinching at the moans. You stopped glancing when someone coughed blood. You stopped seeing the humans. You had to, because your orders do not care about mercy. Your orders are simple. Check the locks, monitor the wounds, count the heads, and follow every command without question. Especially the ones that feel wrong. Like when a noble's son is thrown into solitary for offending a bishop, and you are told to make sure he learns his place. You know what that means. Not directly spoken but clear. You follow through. Because not doing so might mean taking his place. Or worse, disappearing entirely, without record, like a candle snuffed in a gust. You become good at obeying. Efficient. You say things now like, discipline is policy, and this is above our pay. You tell yourself it's survival. But each time, something in you erodes, like damp stone eaten away by dripping guilt. You remember the first time you hit someone. A prisoner had lunged at another with a broken spoon. You intervened. Pulled him off. But he wouldn't stop snarling, wouldn't stop fighting. And in the heat, you struck him across the face with your baton. The crack was sharp. His nose gushed red. He slumped. Silence followed. Not from fear but acceptance. He just lay there, eyes wide and still. And what haunted you wasn't the blood or the sound, it was that he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just let you do it. As if he expected nothing less. As if your violence was already part of the dungeon's architecture. That night, your hand trembled so badly you couldn't hold your spoon. You didn't eat. But the next day, you did. And the day after that, you struck again. This time, without shaking. Some prisoners cry when they're brought in. They beg. They plead their innocence. You used to listen. Some seemed genuine. Some even reminded you of people you knew, an old neighbour, a cousin, a teacher. But then you'd be handed their charge sheets. Crimes that make your skin crawl. You tell yourself it's black and white, that the guilty deserve their cage. But the lines blur when you start to see pattern charges manipulated by jealous rivals, land-hungry lords, envious clergy. You begin to realize justice here is what the powerful say it is. And you? You are just the rope, the stone, the steel. You are not asked to weigh morality only, to lock it up and make sure it doesn't rot too slowly. On particularly cruel days, you're ordered to participate in lessons. These aren't interrogations. They're punishments, spectacles. A public show for the warden or visiting nobility. You hold the torch while another guard whips a prisoner until skin splits and red rivers stain the stone. You watch eyes roll back. You hear bones crack. And your only job is to stand still, to not intervene, to record the lash count. Sometimes you are the one ordered to deliver the blows. The first time, you hesitated. The second time, you didn't. You learned how to strike without damaging vital organs. You learned how to tell when someone would faint and how to stop just before. Not out of compassion but procedure. Because dead men don't confess. And the show must always go on. The coldness doesn't just live in the stone. It lives in you now. You feel it in your fingers when you pick up the keys. In your voice when you shout roll call. In your eyes when you stare back at someone who used to weep and now just sits blank. It is the cold of function. The cold of someone who has had to amputate their empathy just to survive. You speak in orders, not in words. You move in commands, not in thoughts. The warmth you once held for songs, for festivals, for peoplelit, has frozen over, buried beneath layers of protocol and punishment. And yet, sometimes, the cracks appear. A prisoner whispers a prayer under their breath, and you find yourself mouthing along, half remembering the lullabies your mother sang. A drawing scrawled in blood on the cell wallah crude heart, a name you stare at it too long. One morning, you find a rat curled up beside a dying man's hand. Not chewing, not fleeing, just resting there. And your chest aches. Just for a moment. Just enough to remind you the cold didn't kill you. Not entirely. Not yet. But the worst part of all isn't the cruelty. It's the numbness. that you can sit beside a man, gasping for air and feel nothing. That you can eat a crust of bread while someone is whipped in the next room and not lose your appetite. That you can look in a mirror and see no horror in your own eyes. That, perhaps, is what makes this life so insidious. Not that it asks you to be a monster, but that it teaches you how to forget you were ever anything else. They don't give you a sword. That's for soldiers. Honor-bound, sun-touched, battlefield men who fight under banners and go home to parades. What they hand you instead is a short, iron rod blunt, practical, and void of romance. They call it a correction baton. It's not meant to kill, only to convince. The first time you hold it, it feels strange heavier than it looks, as though it carries the weight of every scream it's drawn out. Your fingers close around the leather-wrapped grip, and the sergeant nods. It's not the steel that keeps them in line. It's the hand that holds it. And so you learn. In this place, control isn't just a matter of rule sets, a matter of presence, posture, and the quiet threat of pain that hangs between breath and silence. The keys are sacred. They hang from your belt like relics of a twisted priesthood. Each one is differentsome, jagged like broken teeth, others smooth and long, rust flaking off in whispers. They jingle with your every step, and the sound alone draws glances from behind iron bars. That sound is power. The sound of control, of decision, of hope and hopelessness, bound by a turning wrist. You learn to walk with a rhythm measured, deliberate. Not fast. Never fast. You must project calm, authority. Even when your stomach churns, even when a prisoner stares too long, you walk like nothing can touch you. Because the tools don't work if you look afraid. There's a toolkit mounted in the chamber near the gate. Locked behind a grill, kept behind a curtain of half-truths. Inside, you find the other things. The thumb screws, the boot press, the iron tongs, the gag bit. They have names, of course, but none that you speak aloud. When you clean the mand you will, because rust is a sin, here you wear gloves, not for sanitation, but distance. You try not to look too long. You try not to wonder whose cries still echo in the dried rust beneath the clamps. Some guards handle these tools with pride, twirling them, whistling while they work. You don't. You never will. But you will use them, because someday you'll be told to. And when that day comes, you'll nod. You always do. There's also the chain whip metal links woven into leather cords, each strike singing a different note. It hangs near the main hallway, always visible, a warning wrapped in iron music. The first time you see it used, you feel something shift in you. Not horror, that came later. What you felt then was detachment. You watched skin split, ribs flinch, breath gaspand. You felt like you were underwater, like the world had gone quiet, except for the rhythmic whistle of steel against flesh. The guard swinging it didn't speak. The prisoner didn't scream after the fifth lash. Just the sound. Whip. Silence. Whip. Silence. Like a broken clock marking time with agony. You didn't sleep that night. But the next morning, you still picked up your keys. There are other tools-less obvious, more psychological. The ledger, for instance. A book of names, dates, behaviors. You learn to write in it carefully. A single word defiant, disruptive, compliant can change a prisoner's life. Or end it. One poorly chosen note can mean a flogging, or solitary, or worse. Some guards abuse this power. Scribbling lies, personal vendettas made permanent in ink. You resist at first, but eventually you find yourself writing what's expected, not what's true. Because truth doesn't matter here. Only order. Only control. You come to understand that uniform itself is a tool. Not the fabric, but the idea. It transforms you into something faceless. A symbol. A warden of consequences. You wear it like armor cleaned, repaired, always pressed. You keep your boots polished, not out of pride, but fear. Fear that one scuffed toe will make you look soft. And softness is blood in the water. The prisoners watch everything. They see weakness before it blooms. Your posture becomes stiff, your gaze longer, your words shorter. Not because you're cruel, but because you must be believed. And then there's the silence. Yes, it too is a tool. You learn to wield it like a blade. When a prisoner begs for mercy, you say nothing. When one screams your name, you walk past. When someone sobs for a mother, a daughter, a god, you stare blankly ahead. Because acknowledgement is currency here, and you cannot afford to spend yours. The older guards teach you, never argue, never promise, never empathize. Speak only when giving orders. Answer only with actions. The silence is more powerful than shouting. It builds tension, breaks wills, and eventually they stop speaking altogether. But among the most insidious tools, more than batons or chainsaws, your own face, the expression you wear. You sculpt it over time. A look that's not unkind, but unreadable. You learn how to keep your mouth flat, your eyes steady, your jaw loose. Never frown. Never smile. Just watch. Like the dungeon itself is watching through you. Because, in this job, emotion is a liability. Regret is quicksand. And if you let the pain show, it spreads like mold in damp stone. Your expression becomes your mask, and eventually, you forget how your real face looks beneath it. Over time, you don't even have to use the tools as much. Your reputation becomes a tool in itself. The prisoners learn what to expect from you: firmness, coldness, predictability. That predictability becomes a currency. They comply not because they respect you, but because they fear the chaos that comes when routine is broken. You don't need to threaten. You just need to stand there, keys on belt, baton in hand, silence in your throat, and they fall quiet. Not because they believe in law, but because they know the law doesn't need to believe in them. It only needs to win. You don't remember when it started. Maybe it was the third week. Maybe the fourth. But at some point, the walls began to speak. Not in words, not exactly. They whisper through the dripping of water in places where no pipes run. They creak without footsteps, moan without wind. Sometimes it's just a chill that runs along your shoulder as you pass a certain cell. Sometimes it's a breath that brushes your ear when no one is behind you. But you feel it. The stone is alive. Not breathing, but remembering. You walk these halls and know you are not alone. Even when every cell is silent, even when every torch burns clean and low, the place watches. Not with eyes, but with memory. Each stone in the dungeon has a story. You begin to see them etched into the walls by time, by pain, by the endless repetition of footsteps and suffering. There's a crack on the western corridor that runs from floor to ceiling, thin as a blade. It's always colder near that crack. Even in summer. You tried once to trace it with your finger. You jerked your hand away. The chill was too sharp, too sudden. Someone told you a prisoner once leapt to his death there, smashing his head against the stone until it gave way. You never confirmed it. You didn't need to. The crack told you all it wanted to say. There's a door that no one uses anymore. Room 17. Locked from both sides. Covered in dust so thick it muffles the torchlight. But sometimes, as you pass it, you hear something, a sigh, a shuffle, a breath held too long. You've asked about it. The older guards shrug. That room's been empty for years. Then they changed the subject. You did too, for a while. But once, late in the night, you pressed your ear to the wood. And what you heard wasn't a voice, not exactly. It was a weeping. Low. Rhythmic. As if the room itself missed someone. You didn't sleep well after that. The walls bear marks. Not just time, but intention. Names scratched in with bone or rusted nails. Days counted in linesome, carved in hope, others in madness. A child's drawing in soot. A crude heart pierced by a dagger. A poem, barely legible. They buried the sun when they buried me. Now I bloom in the dark. You've never seen the person who wrote it. You probably never will. But you think about them. Often. You think about what it means to bloom in the dark. Whether you're doing that too. Or whether you're just withering slower than the rest. At night, when the torches flicker and the temperature drops just enough to see your breath, the echoes grow louder. You patrol slower then. Not because you're tired though you are, but because moving too fast makes the walls restless. You feel it. A vibration in your boots. A pressure in your ears. Sometimes the air shifts without explanation. Warm wind where no draft should be. A sudden silence where there should be rats. The dungeon has moods. And you've learned to listen. Not obey, not appease, just listen. It's the only way to stay sane. You've heard stories. Every prison has them. About the girl who was wrongly accused and sings lullabies through the stone. about the traitor who cursed the jailers with his dying breath, and now no bird's nest near the gate. About the baby born in cell 11 who never cried. You don't believe all of them. But you don't laugh at them either. Because this place doesn't feel built, it feels grown. Like it sprouted from the earth, stone by stone, feeding on shame and grief and the iron taste of regret. And like all living things, it remembers those who hurt it, or worse, those who stopped noticing. One night, you fell asleep on shift. Just a few minutes. You swear it. But when you woke, your torch was extinguished and your keys were missing. You found them 2 cells down, placed neatly on the ground. No prisoner claimed it. No lock had been tampered with. But you didn't fall asleep again for weeks. Not out of fear of punishment, but fear of whatever presence had passed you by. Whatever had looked at you, judged you, and decided to return the keys instead of keeping them. The idea that something in this place knew you, not just your job, but you made your blood feel like ice. Sometimes, when the prisoners sleep and the walls settle into their cold, heavy silence, you talk to them. The walls, that is. Just softly. Just to keep yourself from unraveling. You whisper questions. What were you before this? Did anyone ever love you? Do you remember the sun? Of course, the stone never answers. Not in words. But sometimes the air shifts. A drip halts. A distant clang rings at just the right moment. And you pretend that's something. A language you've yet to learn. You pretend you aren't alone. But you are. In this place, everyone is. The guards, the prisoners, even the vermin. You pass each other like ghosts. And maybe that's what you are now. Not dead. Not alive. Just echoing. A presence that exists because it has to. Because the stone keeps your steps in its memory. Because even if you leave one day, the echo of your footfalls will stay. Just like those before you. Just like those who never left. Just like the walls themselves, it always starts small. A glance too long. A whispered request. A folded scrap of parchment tucked under a food bowl. The bribes don't come wrapped in silk. They come disguised as pity, familiarity, survival. A copper coin slipped beneath a stone. A ring, cracked and faded, pressed into your palm by a trembling hand. You tell yourself you'll turn it in. You don't. You hold on to it just for a while. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, deep down, you just wanted someone to see you as more than a shadow in leather. Either way, the exchange is made. Quietly, deliberately, and nothing feels the same after. At first, you justify it. The prisoner only wanted an extra blanket. His cell leaks, and the nights are colder than bone. You're not hurting anyone. In fact, you're helping. You deliver it late, after the torches burn low, and you hear him whisper thank you. It softens you for a moment. You walk lighter. You eat with less dread. For one night, you feel almost human. But then he asks for more. Not another blanket, just a letter. To his wife. To tell her he's alive. You agree again. And this time, it isn't pity. It's because you want to believe the letter will matter. That some part of what you do still reaches the world beyond these walls. You tuck it into your boot and slip it to a kitchen boy. You never hear of it again. The problem is, word spreads. The dungeon may be filled with silence, but it listens. A cellmate hears the whisper. A rival prisoner sees the exchange. Soon, another pair of eyes watches you on your rounds. Another hand extends a coin, not with gratitude, but expectation. And you begin to understand that the prison has an economy of its own, separate from the kingdom above. One built on secrets, survival, and favors. You thought the rules were iron. You thought the chains were unbreakable. But down here, morality is just another currency. Everyone's price is different. And the walls? They keep every receipt. Eventually, it becomes part of the rhythm. The same way you check the locks, you check the grates looking for notes, tokens, crumbs of gold. Not because you've become corrupt, but because refusing now feels more dangerous than acceptance. Deny one man's bribe, and you become his enemy. Accept it, and you owe him. That's the trap. Not the coin, but the obligation. The web tightens. You start keeping a list in your mind. Who you've helped, who you've ignored, who you suspect knows too much. Trust phrase. Every interaction becomes calculation. You scan every face for betrayal before it happens. You tell no one, of course. There's no one to tell. Other guards are no different. You see it in the way they nod at prisoners they used to ignore. In the way they linger by certain cells. You hear it in their coughs, just slightly louder when the warden passes, just enough to cover a whispered exchange. But you don't speak of it. Because what if you're wrong? Or worse, what if you're right and they report you first? So you continue. Quietly. Carefully. Until one night, someone makes a promise they can't keep. It's a woman this time. Gaunt, grey-eyed, wrists like twigs. She's been here for months. Always quiet. Always polite. You brought her water once, unsanctioned. She never forgot. One night, she calls you over. Not loudly, just enough to stop your step. She speaks quickly, urgently. She has a secret, she says. Something valuable. A noble's confession, hidden in a verse she memorized. If you deliver it to a friend in the city, she says, you'll be rewarded. Gold. Real gold. Enough to buy your way out of this stone graveyard. You hesitate. But something in her voice, the way it cracks on the word free, it undoes you. You agree. You follow her instructions. Smuggle the verse out, pass it along. You wait. Days. Then weeks. No response. One morning, her cell is empty. Transferred, they say. Or executed. no one confirms. You ask too many questions and get reassigned to latrine duty for a week. You realize the reward was never coming. It was a test, or a trap, or maybe just desperation, and you fell for it. You think of the verse. You try to recall the words, but they blur now something about truth and blood and fire. You wonder if anyone ever heard it. You wonder if it mattered. You doubt it did. After that, you change. Subtly, but irrevocably. You stop making eye contact. You speak less. You walk faster. You no longer accept anything, not even a kind word. You flinch when prisoners thank you, even sincerely. Because you've learned there's no such thing as a clean favor. Every smile hides a blade. Every plea comes with strings. You weren't trained for this kind of war, kind fought in whispers and trust. But you're in it now, and your only weapon left is distance. One night, as you lock the final cell, a prisoner mutters, "You're just like the rest." You pause. He says nothing more, but the words hang in the air, thick as damp smoke. And you realize he's right. You came here believing you'd be different, that you'd hold on to something, pure duty, justice, integrity. But those things don't live here. They rot too fast in the damp. And what's left behind is compromise and guilt and memory. That's all you carry now. And the keys. Always the keys. The summons arrives on a piece of folded parchment, stained at the corners, sealed with a smudge of wax that never hardened properly. You know what it means before you even open it. You've seen others receive these messages slipped beneath boots, passed in silence, never acknowledged aloud. Report to the chamber, it reads. No details. No names. No instructions. It doesn't need them. Everyone knows what the chamber is. You put the note away. You put your breath away. And you walk. The chamber is colder than the rest of the prison. Not because of stone or draft, but because it's hollow in a different way. The walls are clean, too clean, scrubbed until they bleed lime and rot. Not to erase what happens here, but to prepare for more of it. The table in the center is long, wooden, darker at the edges, where sweat and blood have been absorbed 1,000 times over. Iron rings are bolted into the floor at precise angles crafted, for limbs, for control. You don't look at them too long. There are ropes hanging from hooks, a brazier, a shelf of tools that shine even when the torchlight doesn't. There's a drain in the corner. You know what it's for. You've always known. They hand you a cloth first, then a mask, then gloves. Not for hygiene. For dissociation. You put them on like armor, but there's nothing noble here. The captain explains the case without emotion. He's withholding names. We're on a schedule. No elaboration. Just that. The prisoner is brought in blindfolded, trembling, mumbling prayers. You don't know what he's done. You don't ask. You can't. Because if you did, you might hesitate. And here, hesitation is betrayal. You're told what to do. Not just how, but how much. The brazier must stay lit. The clamp should be tightened just enough. Burn only the surface. Break only one finger. Let him scream, but not pass out. The goal is fear, not finality. You watch. You help. You hold the torch when ordered. You turn the crank when asked. You learn to count out loud. It sounds like you're reciting verses from a hymn. 1, 2, 3. Each number followed by a gasp, a cry, a silence. The silences are worse. They stretch. They wait. They break things you can't see. You think you'll be sick the first time, but you're not. Your stomach clenches. Your mouth dries. But you don't vomit. That disturbs you more than the screaming. You thought you would fall apart, but instead, you adapt. Your hands move efficiently. You wipe the tools before placing them back. You log the details without error. Confessed under stress, you write, even though the confession came before the last scream. Even though you suspect it wasn't true. Even though he begged for his mother in a language you didn't recognize. Afterwards, the silence in your quarters is unbearable. You sit alone, hands still in gloves, too afraid to remove them. Your ears ring. Not with sound, but with pressure. With the echo of things that can't be unscreamed. You pour water into your mouth and miss. Your fingers shake when you finally remove the gloves. Your palms are dry. Your nails are clean, but they still feel red. You scrub them. Then again. You keep scrubbing until the skin stings. Then you stop. Not because it's clean, but because you know nothing ever will be. And yet, when the next summons comes, you go. Of course you go. You don't refuse. You don't flinch. You don't pause. Because now you understand what the chamber is for. It's not just for theme, it's for you. To shape you. To harden you. To teach you to compartmentalize pain like logs in a cellar. Stack it neatly. Store it quietly. Use it when needed. You become more methodical. More practiced. You learn how to time the brakes. How to apply just enough pressure. How to watch without seeing. This isn't sadism. This is science. At least, that's what you tell yourself. Eventually, your name becomes a recommendation. Other guards request you in the chamber. She doesn't lose her temper. She doesn't go too far. She gets results. You hear these things like you're outside your own body. They sound like praise, but they land like chains. You don't smile. You don't respond. You just nod. You're efficient now. You've become what the dungeon needed. A quiet machine in flesh. And then comes the day when the prisoner doesn't scream. Not once. He stares at you with dry eyes. Bleeding, broken, silent. You wait. You twist. You burn. But still nothing. You lean in. You whisper something you barely recognize as your own voice. Still nothing. And for the first time, you are the one who flinches. Not from fear, but from the question that enters your mind like a whisper through the stone. What do you become when the pain stops working? You leave the chamber that night different. Not hardened. Not shattered. Just quieter. Something in you has changed. Not snapped. Just shifted. Tilted slightly off-center. You stare at your reflection in the water bucket. Your face is the same. Your eyes the same. But they don't look back anymore. They just observe. Like the walls. Like the stone. You are no longer a person delivering pain. You are part of the process. And processes don't feel. It begins with a child. No older than 12. His wrists barely reach the manacles. His eyes, too large for his face, track every movement with quiet, animal panic. You were told he tried to steal a nobleman's purse. No weapon. No violence. Just hunger, most likely. You read the charge anyway. Theft. Insolence. Disruption of order. The words feel heavier than the child they're pinned to. He doesn't speak as you shackle him. You don't speak either. What would you say? Welcome? His cell is small, too small for someone that age. The straw stinks, the walls sweat, the torchlight barely reaches his corner. He curls in on himself, hiding in shadows, making himself invisible. And you let him. For days. You watch from the corridor, silent. You toss in food. You count him on roll. But you say nothing. Until one night, you hear him crying. Not loud. Not tantrum tears. Just small rhythmic sobs, like raindrops leaking through a cracked roof. It stabs you in a place you've long kept buried. A sound that doesn't belong in this place. A sound that reminds you of your little brother, years ago, crying after their dog was buried too shallow. You walk past his cell faster after that. But it's not just him. There's the woman from cell 3 arrested for sedition, though her voice trembles when she speaks. She once taught children letters. You know this because she mumbles the alphabet in her sleep. Over and over. Her hands are stained with ink, not blood. She coughs often, a deep, rattling sound that no one treats. You give her water when no one's looking. It doesn't help. She thanks you with her eyes. And that haunts you more than if she screamed. Then there's the man in cell 9. He wears no shoes. His clothes are too fine for this place, though tattered now. His beard is well kept, his posture too proud for someone broken. He says little. Reads more. You wonder how he got a book. Probably bribed a clerk. You ask his charge one day, unable to resist. Falsifying land deeds. A noble accused him. The man claims innocence. You believe him. But belief means nothing here. He'll die in that cell, even if his crime was nothing more than being smarter than someone richer. It starts to weigh on you, this silent collection of wrong place, wrong time souls. You try to harden against it. You remind yourself you don't write the laws. You don't pass judgment. You only keep the locks turning and the torches lit. But something inside you shifts. A sliver of rot working its way through stone. You catch yourself hesitating before slamming a cell door. You find yourself lingering by certain cells longer than others. Listening. Breathing. Hoping for some sign that the system isn't completely hollow. But the signs don't come. One day, a young girl is brought in barefoot, wild-eyed, hair matted with dirt. They say she cursed a priest who had her flogged for cutting herbs too close to the chapel wall. You try to keep your face unreadable, but she stares at you unblinking, defiant. She doesn't flinch when the shackles are tightened. She doesn't scream when she's thrown into the dark. Her silence is louder than any wail. You find yourself thinking about her days later, wondering how someone so small could carry so much rage, wondering why the world punishes that more than it punishes cruelty. And perhaps the worst part of it all is the routine. How easily these faces, these tragedies fold into your day. Wake, walk, feed, lock. You begin to fear not their pain, but your own indifference to it. You once wept in your sleep. Now you wake dry-eyed, mouth set, spine stiff. The injustice doesn't enrage you anymore, exhausts you. You've seen too many beaten, too many cough blood, too many die nameless beneath a system that buries truth beneath paperwork. You begin to see it everywhere now. The man with the trembling hands, accused of blasphemy for correcting a bishop's Latin. The boy imprisoned for singing a protest rhyme in a tavern. The mother jailed for stealing a swaddle of cheese to feed her twins. You write their names in the ledger. You note their status. You carry their faces with you even when you don't want to. Not because they asked for your sympathy, but because you remember what it felt like to believe in justice. Eventually, you stop asking what they did. You already know it won't matter. In the end, their lives hang on whims, not truth. They are collateral. Distractions. Cautionary tales for those above. And you, the guard, are merely the tool used to press their names into dust. No jury. No mercy. Just a key in a lock, and a silence that devours everything. One night, the child from cell 14 disappears. No warning. No escort. Just gone. You ask around, and no one knows her, no one says. Transferred, someone mutters. Reassigned, another shrugs. But you know what it means. And when you pass his empty cell, the silence feels heavier than ever. Like something important was stolen from this place. Like a candle snuffed out in a cavern, never to be relit. You linger by the door a moment too long. Then you turn and walk away. It begins as a smell. Not strong at first, Not different, even just deeper. Like the scent has settled into the walls, into your skin. A mixture of rotted straw, spoiled gruel, dried urine, and breath that has nowhere to go. You thought you were used to it, but then it changes. Becomes something thicker, more cloying, like meat left too long in the sun. The guards don't mention it. They never do. The prisoners start coughing more. Not the weak, dry coughs of cold nights, but a thick, wet hacking that seems to pull from something deep inside. You start carrying a cloth over your face, even though it barely helps. The stink finds its way through. It always does. One prisoner bleeds from the nose. Another trembles without fever. Soon, there's a wheezing chorus coming from the eastern block, and then the southern. You report it in your nightly log, but there's no response. No visit from the physician. No increased rations or clean water. Just more silence. And in that silence, the disease grows. It's not named. There's no diagnosis. But you watch it spread like mold cell to cell, body to body. You see the signs now. The greying skin. The cracked lips. The sunken cheeks. The eyes that lose focus days before the body stops breathing. There's no protocol for death here. No rituals. No ceremony. When someone dies, their body is left until it's inconvenient. Then, 2 guards, sometimes 3 drag it out, limbs stiff, head lolling. The prisoner in cell 11 died sitting up. No one noticed until the guard tried to hand him bread and the hand didn't move. You had to help carry him. He was light. Too light. His bones knocked against each other like dried twigs. You didn't know his name. But his mouth was open, as if caught mid-sentence, mid-prayer, mid-breath. You didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because the stench wouldn't leave your skin. The bodies are taken to the burn pit beyond the gate. No one is buried here. There's no land for that. No dignity. Ash drifts into the prison windows on some mornings, and you smell it in your breakfast sour and final. You try not to think of who you're inhaling, but you do. You always do. Sometimes it's someone who once smiled at you through the bars. Sometimes someone you gave extra water to. Sometimes it's someone who whispered your name like it meant safety. And now, there's smoke. The rats feed well during outbreaks. They grow bold, fat, brazen. You see one dragging a severed toe once, snatched before the guard could sweep it into the sack. You stomp your boot, but the rat doesn't flinch. It stares at you, as if daring you to care. You don't chase it. You can't. Because you've started to understand this place feeds on death. Not just physically, but spiritually. The walls thrive on the quiet surrender, the limp collapse, the stillness that comes after too much suffering. And worst of all, it makes you part of the process. One day, a prisoner asks for lime. Not for food for his cell. He knows he's dying. He says he doesn't want the others to suffer his rot. You're not supposed to oblige. But you do. You bring a small bag. Scatter it across the stone floor. He nods. Doesn't thank you. Just leans back against the wall, eyes closed. He dies 3 nights later. Peacefully, they say. But there's blood on the walls. And his fingernails are torn. You don't ask what happened in those final hours. No one does. You begin to smell death on people before it arrives. It's not just the scent, it's the way their voices flatten, their movements slow, their prayers grow shorter. They start giving things away: half a crust of bread, a secret, a piece of twine hidden in their sleeve. They stop arguing. Stop weeping. They know what's coming, and they accept it in a way that makes your own fear seem childish. You envy them, sometimes their surrender, their calm. You begin to wonder what it would feel like to stop fighting, to just be still. The worst are the ones who die alone. Whispers lost in the stone. No one to witness. No one to remember. You found them hours later, still warm, still curled, like they're asleep. And something in you shatters a little more each time. Not because you knew them, but because you didn't. Because you were here, and you still let them pass unnoticed. You try to tell yourself it's not your job. But deep down, you know that's not true. Or maybe it isn't. That's the problem. The death smell never leaves you. Not really. You wash your clothes, and it's still there. You soak your hands in vinegar, and it still clings beneath your nails. You eat and taste it. You breathe and inhale it. You lie in bed, and it rises from the folds of your blanket like a memory you didn't ask for. People outside the prison notice. They wrinkle their noses when you walk by. Vendors step back. Children stare. They don't know what it is, but they know. You reek of endings. And in your quietest moments, you wonder when it's your time, when the key slips from your belt for the last time, and your boots are dragged along this stone. You wonder if anyone will notice. Or if the walls will simply absorb you, as they have all the others. No fanfare. No flame. Just a flicker of breath, and then nothing. It's subtle, at first. The shift. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or some sudden loss of innocence. It happens quietly, like dust settling on an untouched surface. You begin by doing your job a little more mechanically. You stop flinching when the prisoners curse at you. You stop second-guessing orders, even the ones that twist your gut. You start measuring your tone, calculating your steps. But somewhere along the way, that coldness, once worn like armor, begins to seep inward. You notice it in your voice flatter now, less curious, less uncertain. When a prisoner begs, you don't pause. When someone cries out in pain, you check the chain tension and move on. You start believing what the others say. They're animals, they deserve it. You're just doing what must be done. And even though some small part of you still knows better, it grows quieter. You feed it less. You listen to it less. Because listening makes the job harder. And this job is hard enough already. But the real change, the one that scares you, doesn't come in how you treat the prisoners. It comes in how you treat yourself. You stop feeling proud of who you are, but you stop feeling ashamed too. You just are. A fixture of the dungeon. A piece of the process. You look in the mirror and see a face you recognize, but not one you understand. The eyes stare back, like the bars you keep locked. Silent. Cold. Impenetrable. You walk past cells now with your hands behind your back, posture erect, gait steady. They watch you differently, less as a threat, more as a certainty. Something immovable. And somehow that comforts you. You start to understand the older guards. The ones who joke too dark, drink too much, sleep too little. They're not cruel, they're hollowed. And that hollowness, you begin to see, is a kind of shield. A necessary infection. You feel yourself catching it. You catch it in the way you talk to new recruits, short, clipped, emotionless. You catch it in how you write your report sufficient, without sentiment. You no longer wonder about the prisoners' pasts. You no longer dream of their lives beyond these walls. Instead, you dream of structure, clean cells, perfect silence, empty corridors where nothing stirs, nothing leaks, nothing surprises. Control becomes your peace. Routine becomes your belief system. And in that, you find comfort. Because if everything is predictable, then nothing can break you. Nothing can sneak past your defenses and remind you that this place, this work, is slowly shaping you into something you once feared. But power, even quiet power, has its price. And it begins to show in ways you didn't expect. You notice how you stand taller when others defer to you. You feel the strange flicker of satisfaction when a prisoner lowers their gaze. You don't admit it, not even to yourself, but you begin to rely on that deference. You start to expect it. And when someone challenges a raised voice, a sarcastic remark, a refusal to comply, you react faster than before. Not with violence, always, but with authority. Sharpened words. Harsher rules. You write infractions in the ledger more frequently now. You recommend longer lock-ins. You justify it. They were testing me. They needed reminding. And maybe they were. But you no longer ask why they were testing you. You no longer care what fear or pain or injustice pushed them to act out. You just punish. Because punishment is order, and order is safety. Somewhere along the way, power stopped being your responsibility and became your identity. And the dungeon, its rot, its chains, its silence as it became an extension of you. You patrol the halls and feel more comfortable here than anywhere else. You hear the screams and feel less each time. Not numb, just removed. And yet, beneath all that, a question gnaws at you. Quietly, persistently. It creeps in during the still moments, when the torches burn low and no one is watching. It whispers, "What have you become?" You ignore it at first, dismiss it. But it returns. Every time you look into the mirror a second too long. Every time a prisoner dies, and you don't even blink, you begin to notice your reflection more often now, not out of vanity, but out of disbelief. Who is this person with the locked jaw and tired eyes? When did the lines around your mouth form? When did your hands start trembling only after the shift ends? You start to see power not as strength, but as erosion, as something that wears you down even as it builds you up. You remember the first time you spoke gently to a prisoner. You remember how it felt. Risky. Human. That memory stings now. Not because you regret it, but because you know you wouldn't do it again. You've become too much a part of the machinery. Too integral. Too fused. And the machine does not forgive softness. The machine only runs. Day after day. Lock after lock. Order after order. Until the person holding the keys becomes just another echo in the stone. Just another guard who forgot they were anything else. The night shift changes everything. It bends the dungeon in strange ways, warps it into something deeper, darker, more ancient than stone and chains. The air grows heavier after sundown, as if the weight of all that suffering finally settles when the world above falls quiet. The shadows deepen, not just visually, but spiritually. You light your torch, as always, and make your rounds. But the flame feels smaller at night, less defiant, more reluctant. The corridors stretch in odd directions, longer than you remember. Footsteps echo too slowly, like the walls are chewing on the sound before giving it back. Even your own body feels foreign, your breath louder, your heart more exposed. The dungeon doesn't sleep during night shift, it watches. And it whispers. The whispers aren't always words. Sometimes they're the wind moving where it shouldn't. Sometimes it's water dripping in perfect rhythm for hours. Sometimes it's silence itself, so thick you hear it pressing against your skull. But then there are the voices. Real ones. Faint. Croaking. You pass a cell and someone says your name, but you're sure they didn't. You glance back. Nothing. Just rusted bars and hunched figures turned to the wall. You tell yourself it's fatigue, that your mind is bending under the weight of routine. But the truth is, the dungeon speaks more freely when the sun forgets it exists. It's during these hours, the whisper hours, the old guards call them, that everything blurs. Time, morality, even the line between the living and the not. You've walked past a cell and felt a sudden gust of warmth, too real to be imagined, too wrong to be natural. You've turned a corner and smelled roses, inexplicably, just for a moment. Sweet, old roses. You stopped in your tracks, looked around, saw nothing. Then the scent vanished, replaced instantly by the usual rot. You've heard humming where no mouth moves. Lullabies from a cell you know is empty. You don't report these things. You've learned not to. The guards who do, who ask too many questions during night duty, don't last long. They either transfer out, break down, or become altered. Quieter. Less there. So you keep walking, You count your steps. You talk to yourself. You stare at your torch flame when fear crawls too far into your throat. The worst is when you begin to see shapes where there shouldn't be any. A figure in the corner of your eye. A hand just beneath the surface of the water bucket. A face, your face distorted in the reflection of the chains. You blink and it's gone. Always gone. But not forgotten. Because the night teaches you something the day doesn't dare to, this place has layers. Layers that no one has mapped. Not the architects. Not the wardens. Not the kings who order new cells added. These walls go deeper than bricks. They go back into memory. Into madness. And you're just passing through. A brief flicker of warmth in an ancient throat of stone that forgets you even as it feeds on you. You used to believe in structure. You thought that behind every key, every schedule, every sealed command, there was an invisible hand guiding the chaos, keeping things fair, at least in theory. But as the weeks turned to months, and the months turned to something unmeasurable, you began to see what truly drives the prison isn't Lloyd's hierarchy. It's politics. And you, in your boots and iron-ringed belt, are nothing more than a moving piece on a board you'll never be allowed to see. The prisoners aren't just prisoners. Some of them are tools. Some of them are warnings. Some are favors. You start to notice things. Certain cells cleaned more frequently, meals delivered by senior guards, prisoners who mysteriously vanish before trial, or whose punishment changes depending on who visits. One man is whipped for weeks, then suddenly released. Another, arrested for a petty insult, is placed in chains too tight to move. You ask a question, once just, once, and the captain's look freezes the words in your throat. That's not your concern, he says. And it never will be. Because the rules are written in ink, but the decisions are made in whispers by people who never walk these halls. You begin to recognize the rhythm of injustice, the patterns of preference. Nobles who use the dungeon like a broom closet, sweeping away political inconvenience. Clergymen who sentence doubters behind closed doors. You're told they're heretics. You know they're scapegoats. But you log their names anyway. What breaks you isn't the corruption, it's the apathy you're forced to build around it. You learn to shrug, to nod, to obey. You file paperwork that says executed by decree, though no trial was held. You write escaped beside the name of a man you saw dragged, unconscious, into the oubliette. You learn not to wince when a letter arrives bearing a wax seal you recognize from your childhood history books, because that seal means power, and power doesn't explain itself to guards like you. Eventually, you stop thinking in terms of justice and start thinking in terms of stability. You keep the peace not by truth, but by compliance. You stop dreaming of fairness. Instead, you pray that the politics above you never notice your name. You keep your head down, your voice quiet, your reports perfect. Because the truth is, you are replaceable. You are not a protector of law. You are an enforcer of narrative. You wear the uniform, but someone else wears the crown. and they use you like a quill drawing conclusions in blood. Once, a woman was jailed for insulting the Duke's wife. You heard the story. You knew she hadn't done it. But you still turned the key. Because orders are orders. And silence is survival. You tell yourself that you're only following the chain of command. But some nights, when sleep hovers just out of reach, you wonder how long that chain ironed, whether you're shackled to it more tightly than any prisoner behind your walls. There is a kind of silence that no sound can interrupt. It doesn't matter how many footsteps echo, how many keys rattle, how many prisoners cry in the dark. That silence lives inside you now. It's the silence of someone who has not spoken their truth in a very long time. You wake, you work, you watch. You perform your tasks with mechanical grace, each motion polished by repetition, each word carefully chosen more often, not spoken at all. You stop waiting for greetings. You stop offering any. The other guards talk, but their voices sound like the crackling of distant fireworm, but unreachable. You sit beside them during meals, but you don't eat to share. You eat to survive. You sleep, not to rest, but because your body demands it. When you dream, if you dream, the faces are blurred. Even your own. You used to write letters 1C, to no one in particular. Folded scraps of thought and memory you intended to keep, or maybe send, or maybe just leave behind. But you stopped when you realized you didn't know who to address them to anymore. Everyone you knew before this place is gone now, or has become someone you no longer recognize in your own mind. You don't even remember the sound of their voices. You wonder if they remember yours. Loneliness becomes your only dependable companion. It wraps around you during shifts and follows you down the corridors like a second shadow. It speaks to you more honestly than any guard or prisoner ever has. It tells you the truth of what you've become. Not cruel, not heroic, just present. A watcher, a vessel for duty. You used to hum songs under your breath, quiet lullabies from childhood as you walked the halls. You don't anymore. The sound feels too personal, too alive. You've stopped looking out the windows near the gate. The sky beyond them is too blue, too vast. It reminds you of something lost, though you couldn't say what. Once, a bird flew into the dungeon corridor, fluttered wildly against the ceiling, wings thumping stone. You froze, not out of awe, but confusion. You had forgotten what it looked like to be free. The bird died within the hour. No one removed it. You watched it decay. You did nothing. And somehow, that felt like the most honest thing you'd done in weeks. You don't cry anymore. That surprises you sometimes, how your grief no longer spills. It just stays still and deep, like water in a well no one draws from. You pass your reflections sometimes in the bucket, in the blood-polished steel, and you stare too long. Not to admire, not to mourn, but to check if you're still there. You are, but only just. You are the watcher now, and you've watched even yourself drift into a shape the world no longer calls by name. You didn't notice them at first. They arrived like any other blindfolded, wrists bound, bruises blooming quietly beneath the surface of their skin. A name you forgot. A cell you rarely passed. They didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just sat, still and silent, like they had arrived already carrying the weight of their punishment long before the cell door slammed shut. You logged them like you logged all the rest time of entry, condition, assigned rations. But something in your hand trembled as you wrote. You didn't know why. Not then. You kept your distance for the first week, but they watched you every time you passed. Not with hatred. Not with fear, but with something that unsteadied you more than either. Recognition. Not of your face, but your role. As if they saw through the silence and the keys and the uniform and understood what you were, what this place had turned you into. And, worse what, you had let it. They greeted you once. Softly. A single word, evening, you said nothing in return. But it echoed inside you longer than any scream ever had. You started walking slower past their cell. Not stopping. Just listening. Some days they would humor quiet tune that made no sense but sounded like memory. Other days they whispered to themselves, names or poems or prayers. But most days they simply existed, calmly, as if the dungeon could not touch them, as if they had found peace within its jaws. Then came the night of the storm, rain pounding above like God's own judgment. A leak broke open in the ceiling near their cell. Water pooled quickly, mixing with the grime and straw. They were already soaked by the time you reached them. No complaint. No demand. Just a quiet request. May I move to the corner? The rules said no. You were supposed to wait for clearance. But something in you couldn't deny them. You opened the door. Watched them shuffle, barefoot, to the driest patch of stone. They thanked you. You nodded. For the first time in weeks, you looked them in the eye. And what you saw wasn't a prisoner. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a victim. It was a mirror. You saw yourself, not as you were now, but as you could have been. A version of you untouched by rot. A version that chose softness still. From that night on, you changed. Slowly, quietly, you brought them clean water when the others weren't watching. Slipped them extra bread when no one tracked the count. They never asked for more. Never exploited your kindness. They only ever said, thank you. Sometimes they would tell you stories. Not personal ones, just tales. Of birds who forgot how to fly, of flowers blooming in graves, of kings who disguised themselves as beggars. You pretended not to listen, but you never missed a word. And for a time, you felt something you thought had long died, possibility. But redemption, like mercy, does not belong in the dungeon. One morning, they were gone. No notice. No transfer. No explanation. Their cells stood open, empty, as if they had never existed. You asked. No one knew. or pretended not to. That night, you sat by the cell long after your shift ended. You waited. For a return? For an answer? For the hum? None came. But, in your chest, something cracked open and something else began to bleed. One day, your key doesn't fit. It sticks in the lock like the dungeon itself is asking you to pause, to reconsider, to remember something you've forgotten. You jiggle it until the bolt gives and you move on. But the sensation stays with you, that tiny moment of resistance, that whisper of finality. It's been years now. Or at least it feels like it. Time has melted in this place. Your bones know the weight of every corridor. Your ears no longer flinch at screams or silence. Your steps are practiced. Your presence is expected. And yet, you feel more ghost than guard, more shadow than sentinel. You don't speak unless spoken to. You eat alone. Sleep lightly. You haven't laughed in, you don't remember. The dungeon has changed around you. New prisoners come. New guards too. You don't learn their names. You don't ask their stories. You know how it ends. Everyone leaves eventually. Some are dragged. Some simply vanish. And some fade like you have becoming part of the stone. One night, while making rounds, you stop in the middle of the corridor. For no reason. Just stop. And you realize you haven't thought of the sky in months. The color of it. The shape of clouds. The way it smells after rain. You used to love storms. Now, all water means to you is damp straw and swollen ankles. You think of your mother's voice. You can't remember its pitch anymore. Only the rhythm. You can't remember the feel of your first home. Just that it was smaller than this dungeon, and somehow infinitely more vast. There will be no farewell when you go. No feast. No ceremony. Just a shift change. A new key ring issued. A new name scratched onto the guard ledger. If you die here, they'll wrap you in burlap and take you out the same gate as the prisoners. You know this. You've seen it. No one will carve your name into stone. No one will tell your story. And maybe that's fitting, because you've stopped being a story. You're just a continuation of one. A chapter. A line. A sentence that trails off before anyone can ask what it meant. You wonder sometimes late at night, when the torches flicker low, if the walls remember you. Not your face. Not your voice. Just your weight. The way your footsteps fell in rhythm. The way your breath filled the spaces others had left empty. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us become in the ender pattern remembered by stone. You sit by the same cell where that last prisoner once sang. You whisper their story into the cold. You say it softly, like a secret meant for the dark. No one hears, but still you speak it. And for one moment, you feel the air shift. You close your eyes, and you let it. Because maybe the dungeon doesn't need names. Maybe it only needs echoes. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we survive by becoming the whispers we once feared. By leaving behind not monuments or legacies, but moments, sounds, footfalls, silence, that someone else might follow. Someone like you